Welcome to happiness. What are the sorts of things? I asked for a whiteboard or an actual old-fashioned paper, but they just didn't have any. So, what are the sorts of things that make you happy?
Children.
Children. What are all the time? What about our children? What are those moments with our kids where we feel, oh, when they're sleeping? No kidding, but hold, you know when you look at their cute little faces when their faces are slack in sleep, isn't that just gorgeous? Okay, so what else makes you happy? Watching sleeping children.
The smell of babies.
Oh, especially their heads. Their heads, not that end. The heads. Smell of babies. What else? Call it out.
Children laughing.
Laughter, yes, especially kids' laughter.
Seeing children have fun.
We're such a parent-centered group. Yes?
Being with my family, wherever we are, like on holidays or just away for the day anyway, just being as a group together.
Okay, being as a group all together is what you're talking about, that sense of cohesiveness and belonging when everything's working.
I'll be more self-centered and say that I'm understood and people understand my needs. If I expect to bring them, I might be able to satisfy my own need, but being understood that that's how I tick and how I can't really express that, but being understood is very important to my myself.
Yeah, you're talking about connection, that intimacy. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Sometimes solitude and peacefulness.
Contribution to the society. Not just always want to be, what the society can give to me or be selfish. What else you can do to the society? Make the world feel better, happier world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No fighting, no war.
No torture of children,
Yeah.
please. Yes. We're getting into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, aren't we? Okay. Well, conversely, what makes you distressed? Upset, angry, sad, uptight, anxious, worried, angry.
Something that happens out of your control.
Something out of control. Big one.
Not getting credit for what you've done.
Pardon?
Not getting credit for what you've done.
Traffic.
Being perceived by others. I have this sort of thing about being late and arriving and looking like a complete disorganised idiot. In fact I am. I'm quite happy with that, but I don't like people, or the perception that people may perceive me as being a disorganised idiot and being judged by what is supposed to be a norm of social behaviour.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying is like, I accept that I'm a disorganized idiot, but they judge me for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's that about?
Injustice.
Injustice, yes.
The things like you were saying when you hear about abuse of children and stuff like that on TV or you see anything like that, that really distresses me.
Injustice, cruelty, yeah.
Being asked or expected to do more and solve more problems than I have capacity to do. Over a challenge. And as a consequence, for me, ending up shouting, when that's not really where I wanted to go at all. It's a real tailspin doing that.
We'll be speaking about this stuff. Brilliant, thank you. What we've been talking about is we're having an experience of our feelings. Whether it's traffic or the scent of a baby's head in our nostrils, probably one that's peacefully resting at the moment. Whether we're being asked to do too much or going into a tailspin, yes?
How many more handouts are you on? Just get the...
Does anyone else need handouts? There's a guy in the back that needs as well. Thank you. No, he's got it, honey. It came up. Thank you. We're feeling the stuff that's happening, right? of something that's light. Oh, not my phone. Or the pen. If I drop this pen, we all know what's going to happen, right? It's going to fall. I drop the pen, it falls, right? Somebody punches me in the face, I feel upset, right? I drop the pen, it falls. Somebody punches me in the face, I feel upset. I get a hug from a beautiful child in a peaceful moment, I feel peaceful, right? Stuff happens, and then you see the result, that's what it is, right? Wrong. There's an intervening force here. What makes this pen fall?
Gravity.
Gravity! Not my dropping it. Exactly. There are other places in the universe where I let go of this pen and it won't fall. Right? Because the laws of gravity apply differently, but there are still those laws of gravity. There's an intervening force here that's not getting enough credit, that is hidden and invisible, and it is the gold. If there was one thing that you leave here with, it is with this word, more deeply understood, more intimately connected to than you ever have before. And that is thought. It's your thinking. I could have come up here very kind of, oh my God, we're late, oh my, the room's locked too. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I could have been like that. People would have understood and been okay with it, yeah, because it would have been, yeah, she's running late, I can see why she's getting upset. But there's nothing inherent in being late that requires me to be upset, except for the gravity of thinking about being upset. But instead, the gravity that I had was the thought of, it's okay. So the gravity of my thought of it's okay led me to feeling okay. That's the way it works. It's that simple and that utterly complicated and hard at the same time. It's not going to get more complex than this, even though it is. From here on, it's all detail. Any challenges? Because believe me, I've had the same questions, the same, you're kidding, kind of moments with this stuff. They'll come.
When is it okay to be stressed?
Whenever you feel distressed.
When do you cross the...
It's always okay for you to feel what you're feeling. That's just one of the questions from earlier. You feel whatever you feel. The thing is, you're okay. It's, you know, like when you watch a movie, and you can watch a movie that's like, you know, how many of you cried in Bambi when was mom? Me too. But Bambi's a cartoon character. Bambi's not real. But we cried. We got caught up in the movie. Our thinking was really engaged in that moment. We love Bambi. Bambi's so cute with those big eyes. And Bambi's mom was gone. What that does is remind us of all our unresolved griefs. And what we were thinking about was care for children and loss and lack in ourselves. It was our thinking. It wasn't Bambi's mother dying. Bambi's mother doesn't exist. Whenever we get distressed, we've just gotten lost in our movie. Does that make sense? I approach this in a very intellectual way. Other people you find talking about this in ways that are, you know, just tune into the feeling you're having when you're listening to me kind of stuff. And although that can be relevant, actually I think that your intellect counts, even though, and this addresses some of the questions that some people came up with. Garrison Keller has a great quote that says, the intellect is like a four-wheel drive. It enables you to get lost in more remote spaces. And nevertheless, I have a profound respect for the intellect. So we're going to ride that paradox a little bit here. So what is this thinking stuff that I'm talking about? Well, of course it could be that chatter in our head. The next point is 10 to 50,000 thoughts a day according to the National Science Foundation. But they can very much be nonverbal. Babies can be clinically depressed. Little babies, clinically depressed. Obviously, they have no cognitive capacity for thought. Their Broca regions haven't developed yet. Broca region is where language is. And physical pain is so extremely nonverbal that in extremis of the experience of pain, it can completely eradicate the very capacity for language. Part of the clientele I work with as a private psychologist are people who have been tortured. I was tortured myself as part of my childhood. I know that this can wipe out, pain can wipe out the capacity for language at all, but it doesn't wipe out our capacity for meaning. That is human and doesn't shut off until the moment all of us does. These verbal thoughts have embedded in them belief systems and assumptions. Yeah? So part of what's going on when we're having too much thrown at us is an expectation that actually we should be meeting it. You know, it's like, by the way, it's not shiny and warm today, right? I noticed that none of you are feeling guilty about that. Because you don't take it on, right? I mean, that's a very extreme one, but it's the same process. If too much is coming at you, well then don't take it on. Ta-da!
The truth is, sorry.
Yes, please do.
You know, like Norway or people there, their suicide rate is a lot higher than the people under the sun. So why they are more higher? They must have a psychological kind in fact or on them. The sun make them happy, make us happy.
It's not the light, it's the fact they don't come out of doors and they don't socialise with other people and they become insular in their ways.
And also the production of certain endorphin-related chemicals that get triggered under sunlight. But then again, it's still getting caught up in the story. No, we have a slide up here later. We only ever have one problem. And that problem is that we're lost in our thinking. Someone who's suicidal is lost in their movie. And they think that's all that there is, and that's the only interpretation of what's going on for them.
I can see why that makes sense, because the friends of mine that are busier, do a lot more physically all the time, tend to be happier. The ones that do less and have a lot of time to think tend to get depressed more. And it's to me, I see it very obvious.
And it's not that thinking is a culprit. We cannot not think. When there's stillness on top, there's a slide about this later, our consciousness is this tiny little dot floating on a vast ocean of thinking going on subconsciously. It's that our relationship with thought is such that, generally speaking, because we so misunderstand it, if we don't kind of distract ourselves from it, it can really get on top of us. So what the thing to, I'm thinking of a quote by Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain, that 1 million people can believe a stupid thing doesn't make it true. Billions of people can believe something that's wrong, it doesn't make it true. Most of humanity suffers our thinking.
Our kids think, like my son, thinks so much about everything to such deep levels that it's, you know, so how, I mean, that's just the nature of who he is or they are.
This is nature of his relationship. In terms of the thinking bit, yes. In terms of the thinking deeply about stuff, sure. There's something about his intelligence.
Right, but he doesn't have the maturity to grasp that I don't control that, or, you know, so maybe we think about it, but we can put it into a context of control or whatever. What does the 9-year-old do? What does the 10-year-old do? You're thinking.
I think the weather metaphor would be pretty good. But there are ways of talking to him. It's like, well, what are things that you know you're not responsible for? And also, it's like, well, kind of when you grow up, there's this little Frances, the Firefly book we got from the fire department. And Frances the Firefly wanted to fly, but her wings hadn't grown enough yet, so she couldn't get off the ground. And but she really wanted to fly like a big person. So what she did was she lit a match and she held it behind her. And she set fire to the whole village. And she felt really guilty about it. She tried to, she tried to do more than what she could. So things like that. They did allegories, stories with children. Because there's always much more meaning in it than we ever even see ourselves. They'll get what's useful to them. But what's most important, and we'll talk about this and also talk about it later, is your congruence with it. Your being okay with the fact that right now, people are being tortured, kids are being used for porn, people are being killed, wells are being poisoned, corporations are perpetrating all sorts of crimes, that you need to have an okayness with that. Please welcome, yes. Not in the sense of it's okay, like injustice is okay and cruelty is okay, but recognizing that it's our thinking about it which causes the distress about it. When you're congruent with that, you lead. That's critical.
Is it, I mean, is there a chance that it sort of, you have the same effect? Yesterday you sort of mentioned about writing. Is this sort of like a non-chemical writing? Does it rid us of our passions?
No, quite the opposite, really. There's this cultural myth, for instance, about artists. Oh, the passionate artist. Bipolar Byron. Yeah. You know the Byron's bipolar, yeah? Or we look back and think that he was. And there's this drama of the artist, the suffering, the intensity of the passion, as if the passion comes from that instability, but it doesn't. I am standing up in front of you, and I think it was very clear that I'm passionate about this. Yeah. I'm also deeply happy. I also have, I'm sorry, I'm really vulgar. I'm just going to be myself up here. I have a really fucked up childhood. But I'm really happy. And I'm really passionate. And it's been the ability to allow myself to put thought and thinking in its place. To recognize that when I let thought drift to the side, what's left is something actually really wonderful. Unconditionally so. That it's then, the passions that I've had have been allowed to flower and blossom in ways that I never thought possible before. It's a really important question, because a lot of people hold on to dysfunctional thinking because they're afraid of losing something really nice. And creativity can be one of the things they're afraid of losing.
You're sort of saying it's okay, you sort of take a feeling that may be negative, you acknowledge it, and then you say it's okay to get over it or move on. And you sort of just allowing yourself to put it in a box.
I'm going to be really, really attentive to the language you used. And it's not saying that to yourself, but knowing. That then becomes a thought that you hear inside. That a recognition that this is so. Because saying it is just like telling yourself you should or shouldn't, did it. And then that puts more stuff on top. Oh my God, I got upset again. Oh, I'm such an idiot.
How can you let yourself go? Just for example, for me, if I had an experience like, I know I can predict if my child do this, and then she will do it in the wrong way. So, I will of course say, as a mother, I say, you should do this way. As I have told you, you should do this way. But of course, with the child, with the stubborn child, she will say, no, mommy, I will do my own way. She can fail it. Are you just learning to fail that way, or how does learning be?
These are really good questions, and there's no formula.
How can you let it go? Just say, okay, let you fail. I can't let her fail. I know.
Why not? She's okay.
It's not what happens here. We'll just let she fail. It's not the end of the world, but for me, I feel anxious. No, why? Because I know you do this way, it's the wrong way. Why can't you do this way?
What I hear you saying is that I love my daughter, and I want what's best for her.
That's right.
And I know what's best for her. And I know the path for her to get to that.
Exactly.
There's no problem with the first two.
Can I give for an example?
Sure.
Of something that's just taken me very, very by surprise. We have a 17-year-old now who's gifted, but so lazy.
Yes,
It's untrue.
exactly.
Okay.
Very.
So he's doing his first year sixth form, and he's not working
No.
because he's gifted.
Yeah, exactly. I'm clever. You know, she's saying myself,
So-
you're clever, aren't you?
We told him several times, we encouraged him, we did lots of things, tried to make him do his work, but ultimately, he's 17, it's his call. So he screws up. So he took his AS1s, and he screws up. He gets distinction in subjects that he likes, and everything else is rubbish. And so he came to us to say, I've really made a mess. Right, so what I'm going to do is the school's not giving me what I needed. I'm going to change schools. So I've been down this other school, and I've talked to them, and they said it's okay. So would you mind coming up to my other school and signing the papers? Because I'm going to restart my sixth form down at the other school.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. So,
So some,
just fixed it, you know, and he's doing great.
Have to fix it yourself, okay.
one of the things I talk about in my next presentation is how children really, especially gifted children, they got to own it. They got to understand it, they got to turn it around, they got to peel it apart and put it back together, sometimes wonkily. It's theirs, and then they'll be okay with it. They've got to do it. A lot of gifted kids are like that. I know you've got to come, but there's a real versus true slide I really want to get to you, and it's to you guys, and it's towards the end. Beliefs get stacked. I don't have to work, I'm gifted. It's okay. Because my child needs good grades to get a good job. What's underneath that is my child needs a good, well-paying job in order to be happy. Sits underneath, well, money's going to make my kid happy. Ask Britney Spears or Charlie Sheen, is that really true? No. And besides, that stuff can be taken from you anyway, look in a minute. Ask anybody that was taken on the Holocaust. Whole neighborhoods, just careers, possessions, children, gone, minutes. Okay, thought. Here's the floating thought. The little floating conscious, little lonely boat of conscious thought floating on the vast sea of subconscious thinking. So much is going on in there. So much. You will never know the contents entirely of this ocean, ever in your life, ever. Ever. And there are traumas in here, misunderstandings in here, innocent, ever so innocent. My favorite example, I was talking to Kay about this last night. I was trotting along with my then husband, the biological father of my daughter, and they're both very, very playful. And I was saying, oh, you guys are so playful. She's got it too, must be in her genes. Guess what she was wearing that day? She was wearing jeans. She's walking along, you could just see like her suddenly come to a stop, and her hair even swayed forward, and she swiveled down from her hips to look at her trousers. And she froze like this, just looking at it. You could see her mind going zzz. I had to turn to her and say, honey, I can't explain about chromosomal DNA to you right now, but just trust me, it's not in your trousers. Now, other stuff has happened, like she thought that I made her biological daddy be really mean, and I sent him away. Actually, he was abusive, and that was his stuff. But she had gotten hold of this thought. Very innocent, so innocent. Because I had to call the police on him, she thought, and he was taken out of the house. I got the police in to take him away. I'm such a bad mommy. And all the anger coming at me because I was such a bad mommy for making her daddy go away. Just got the wrong end of the stick. It's ever so innocent. It's ever so innocent. But wrong. We get stuff from culture, family, school, media, religion, generalizations from circumstance, things that happen, getting mugged by somebody once, then everybody of that skin color that comes up to you wearing similar dresses, a little bit of shop, all that kind of stuff. It sets up filters of what we perceive, even of what's possible, of what we deserve and don't deserve. And you'll never know what all of that is. You're never going to know it all. It's all lurking about, coming up in these amorphous moods, affecting the impact, the outcome of that little boat, the direction it goes. Now we have these habits of thinking. We have I was talking yesterday about how nerves that fire together wire together, which means that we have habits. So if we have associations of expectations, I go up to that person, they're usually quite mean to me, and so you see them and you start getting uptight, and then they say something, and it comes through that filter of your preconceived experiences with them that have already been judged and filtered, and you get the feeling again. And so your cable for that gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And we have these machines, these cables, that generate anger, that generate anxiety, generate distress, and generate happiness. We expect that we're going to be happy when. We expect we're going to be distressed when. We expect we're going to be anxious when. We expect we're going to be angry when. And the thing about these things are that they are running. This sea is going on. Yeah? There's chemicals to this, neurotransmitters, capacity for various neurotransmitters. You get your fight or flight cortisol hormones here, right? You get more of your endorphins over here. The body has a greater capacity when you're habitually feeling angry to generate the cortisol than it does the endorphins. Your body goes, okay, you want me to make this? I'll go do that. Okay, you want me to go make cortisol? I'll go do that. You want me to make me endorphins? Okay, I'll make up your mind already. It's just going back and forth. Because the brain has an immense plasticity, and it builds and rebuilds itself constantly, including updating these machines. So that, for instance, especially anxiety. You've heard of generalized anxiety disorder? You know people that walk around kind of angry most of the time? Their machines are going. It doesn't even have to have a reason. You don't need a reason. You just feel it. And that's the way it is too. You don't have to have a reason to be happy. You just feel it. And you feel and you're thinking, so all you need is a happy kind of thought. It's feeding this one. Giving resources to this one. We all know people react differently. Some people talked about traffic. Well, it could be someone else's opportunity to finish their audiobook or finish listening to their favorite album. Even things like serious illness. There are a couple of stories, cancer and amputation specifically. There is this soldier in Israel who was on duty, and an explosion went off, and when he woke up in the hospital the next day, he was considerably shorter than when he had woken up the previous day, from about here. And what he felt was immense, overwhelming bliss. Because he knew in that moment his happiness and well-being did not reside in his legs from the thighs down. He got it. Probably wouldn't be what I would think. But it's the gravity of our thoughts, not the nature of the thoughts. It's the nature of thinking itself, yeah? Cancer. There's a story, this guy who had this really curmudgeonly, persnickety neighbor who every time the kids' balls would go in her yard, she'd like punch holes in them and then toss them back over. I mean, really. Not exaggerating. And then one day the guy came home and he sees her kind of leaning on her fence, kind of smiling and waving. He's like, next day, same thing, next day, same thing. After 2 weeks of these, he goes up to her, he goes, Emma, I notice you're different. What happened? And she said, you know, I had the greatest news. Absolutely fantastic. I've been diagnosed with terminal lymphatic cancer. And if I hadn't been diagnosed with this, I just would have just gone on by till I died in my sleep of old age. But now this is a wake-up call to enjoy every moment I have now. Because it's the gravity of your thinking, the nature of thought. Not, yeah? There's nothing that happens that means you must think or feel any one thing or another, including the fact that right now children are being tortured.
Here's the question: how do you train yourself to let go then? How do you is it possible to there's certain things which I recognise really stress me out, maybe traffic, maybe, I don't know, there's certain
hang on a second, stop right there.
Yeah.
Part of it is reflecting, noticing your language. What stresses you out? Is it the traffic?
I don't know.
Is you thinking about the traffic?
I don't know. Maybe it is. Yeah.
We did.
Yeah. For
It can't be.
instance,
No, 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 it can't be.
You know, yeah, to turn it around. Both Angelique and I are in the army. Okay, she'll go to Afghanistan in April. Yeah, I'll be a single parent for 6 months. And that doesn't stress me out at all. I see that as a quite. Excuse me. I see it's quite a positive experience that I'll go through with my children. They will they'll solely rely on me. But I will be very close to them by going through that experience. I don't have the sort of anxiety or worry about actually safety. I see it as a positive experience. Now, for many people, they'd be freaked out by, you know, having to deal with things on their own or worrying about a very stressful situation. But yeah, I can deal with that. Yet I get very stressed about things like traffic. Why is that?
That's a really profound and important question. And what it points to is the fact of thinking is miraculously simple. Because it doesn't matter how big or small or how seemingly massive something may be. I was talking yesterday how one girl's wrong question on a test is structurally similar to the fact that my distress over the fact of my son's death. It doesn't matter how immense or small it may look from one perspective or another. It's the fact of the thinking that's doing it. It's the thinking that's driving it. It can only come from thinking. Because that's the way things work. And so it may be like, well, why don't I have the capacity to handle these little things? And you know, I asked myself similar questions when we moved. We were promised all these white goods, and we were told this there. We arrived very late on a Saturday night, Sunday morning. There's no dishwasher, there's no washing machine, and there's no fridge. And, you know, I freaked out over the fridge. It was as if my happiness was located in a fridge that wasn't there. And we had loads of discussions about this, and I was just laughing at myself, watching myself have these freakouts. I was just had that distance from it, because I'm allowed to feel whatever I feel. And I'm also okay when I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling. So I was able to keep that distance most of the time.
Yeah, I think you have to address the problem of paradox, because what he's put to you is a paradox.
Absolutely.
And you know, I believe that all truth is ultimately paradoxical. You know, but you have to, it's too easy to say that he just has a choice. You can just choose not to.
Yeah, I didn't say that, did I?
No,
Yeah.
It is implicit in what you're saying, is that your thoughts are a choice, and of course they are ultimately a choice, and they're ultimately not a choice, because if you choose to think the wrong things, you might end up dead in certain circumstances. And so your thoughts are a choice, and they're not a choice.
What happens is a really important point. And you know, when I had the slide up about that vast sea of subconscious thought that we're never going to know the complete contents of, it's in part addressing that issue. Because what happens is we lay down choices we make, and then other choices get stacked on top of them until it looks just like it's no choice at all. And then to be able to exercise choice, it can be perceived as, oh, well, just don't feel that way. Yeah? And it's not like that. Sometimes unbuilding that can take years, even decades. And that's only if you work hard on it. Yeah, so the concept of choice and the application of it can be a very, very long-term thing. I didn't get happy because one day I woke up out of my psychotic PTSD experiences and I said, okay, from now on, I'm gonna be happy. It didn't work that way. I was in 20 years of psychotherapy. I did 5 to 6 years of energy psychology on top of that. And then I started being happy. Yeah? But I made a choice when I was 6. When my suicide attempt didn't work. I tried, I really wanted to die when I was 6. And I did everything I could to kill myself that night. And when I woke up the next morning, I made a choice just to hold on to the idea that things could be different. That one choice patterned the next 30 years. Because it got stacked on top. So yes, there are paradoxes involved and choices not as simple as it may seem to some. So thank you for raising that.
But presumably there must be something that says, and it's to do with your belief system, so I think that's quite a good way of thinking about it. But sometimes, for instance, and pardon impertinence if it comes across as that, but your resolution to yourself about what you do when your wife's away is based on fundamental principles that you feel very strongly as a father of what you will do for your family and your children, and it's all right because whatever's thrown at you in that, and you're a soldier, so whatever's thrown at me in that, I can deal with it, and I'm cool with it. But the traffic is just fucking irritating. Which is a really different kind of a thought, you know, because now that could get in the way of really important things that I'm actually tackling and doing kind of different mode. So presumably there could be, well, that may be the paradox is just that collision of different levels of thought.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, thank you. And another explanation could be, well, you know, you spent a lot of time thinking about your family and your marriage and your relationship. You haven't really given a lot of time yet to thinking about your relationship with traffic.
Is it also not a coping mechanism, the fact that the way he's actually dealing with his wife going away, it's the fact that he can get angry at the little things instead. That's a way of him getting rid of his anger in like different ways without showing it.
That's the level of psychology I've got a slide.
There's a slide.
It's got pretty pictures in it and animation and everything. We've covered that. Experience is what we think it is. It's our relationship with that event. We talked about traffic jams. Job loss can be greeted with relief or dread, depending on how you're thinking about it and how much your spouse makes. Illness, even death in the family. Is the door open? The sweet uncontained sounds of the All feelings are the other side of the coin of thought. You can't feel sadness without a sad thought. You can't feel happy without a happy thought. You can't feel angry without an angry thought. You can't feel scared without a scaring thought. So again, the paradox, it's that simple and that complicated at the same time. Because it's always that simple in terms of, I'm feeling sad because I'm having a sad thought. Yeah, but why am I having the sad thought? And when I was 2, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah? It's kind of complicated and simple at the same time. Being able to hold that is really critical. Because being able to hold that is part of what allows you to respect you feeling what you feel in the moment. Because if you go too much on the side of, well, it's just my thinking, it can lead you to be very non-compassionate towards yourself and others. That's just not. Compassion is really critical. Compassion has to do with the acceptance of all those stacks of thinking. I'm going to slide to that too later. Going deeper in here. Okay, so the impact of trauma on big life events is even really possible. Please come in. Then the fact is that they don't follow the physical laws. I had so many experiences being broken, irreparably broken when I was growing up. Just to let you know, I'm not going to tell you like any specifics because that would be inappropriate, but I can tell you my mom was a drug addict, she was a drug dealer, and she also pimped me out to feed her habit. and she'd put me out to people that really weren't very nice. I felt so broken, so that by the age of 6, I really wanted to die. I was having such an experience of being broken, but I wasn't. Sure felt that way though. Holding that paradox. I had no idea about the paradox at the time. But when I woke up the morning after from trying to commit suicide, I had an inkling of it, with that thought, things can be different. I didn't know it, but I was already on this journey, already from then. The impact of trauma and big life events. It doesn't like follow the law of thermodynamics. We don't say, well, welcome, I'll make you a cup of tea as long as the law of thermodynamics is working and the kettle is actually going to heat up the water. We can trust it, it's going to happen. We can always, what is like the law of thermodynamics, it seems to me, it's a principle, a paradigm, is that thinking generates feelings. What is the real key to our well-being and happiness? There's a story, I love this story. It's a Sufi story, so it's not funny. But it's a joke, it meant to be a joke anyway. There's this guy, and he's drunk, and it's like late on Saturday night. And you know that really deliberate way drunk people have of moving when they're trying really hard to look like they're sober? So he's on his hands and knees, and he's padding under a street lamp. And there's a cop across the street looking at this guy. He's watching him pat around for a few minutes. And the cop comes up to him and he says, "Sir, anything wrong? Can I help you?" He said, "No, officer, everything is fine." And the cop says, well, what are you doing? He says, "I'm looking for my keys." There were no keys there. So the cop says, well, your keys aren't here, so where'd you lose your keys? And he flings his arm back grandly and he says, "In the bushes over there when I went to take a piss." And the cop says, "Well, why are you looking for them here then?" And the guy says, "Well, isn't it obvious, officer? The light is better here." And that's what circumstance is. Circumstance is that street lamp. That's where the light's better. That's where it seems so obvious to look. But it's not there. Of course, the metaphor falls down because I don't want to have it too much tied to like bushes where there's urine in it, but never mind. Past events happened. Nothing's going to change the fact of any of our pasts, right? We might get new information that reframes it. I heard of someone that was treated for really intense issues over being abandoned by his father, and he was called during treatment by the FBI to say, "I think we found your father through dental records. He was murdered by a serial killer." He was never abandoned at all. But, you know, past events are what they are. They don't change. Our relationship with them changes. That's because our thinking about it can change. Relationship with our past is made of thought. Our relationship with current circumstance comes from our thought. Which means reliance on that personal level of thinking, the level of psychology, to experience well-being is like looking under the street lamp for your keys. They're not there. So what's this inner wisdom, happiness, well-being stuff? This is it. And then there are corollaries that come out of this. Knowing yourself unconditionally as, unconditionally, peace, love, kindness, compassion, wholeness, intactness, unchangeable, unharmable. Even if someone's legs get blown off, they haven't been hurt. It's just their legs that got hurt, not them. Knowing that leads to having that deep sense of peace We can be reminded of that when we're holding a sleeping baby and that scent fills us. When we're with our family, having that sense of belonging. When we're giving of ourselves in this really generous, open-hearted way. Where it's coming from is this. Where it seems to come from is the baby, the contribution. It's where the light's been. It leads to inspiration and intuition. Heaven forfend, circumstance forfend, I would not wish it on anybody, even though you'd already be okay. Anyone gets in a car accident, and really bad car accident, and they're brought over to A&E. Oh, by the way, I can send these slides to you, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. I'll circulate a sign-in sheet. And you get a choice of a few doctors. One, they're all experienced, so no worries. They're all capable. One is really calm and confident. Another one is really anxious because the day before he lost somebody on the table. The other one is really distressed because he's going through a really tough divorce. Which one do you want?
I don't think one. The guy who lost one yesterday doesn't want to make the same mistake twice.
Why do you want the calm guy, or woman, you never know. Seriously, why?
Because you assume he's happy, but he doesn't follow.
Not that he's happy, but that he's connected to his resources, which may include happiness in that moment.
Yes, but then his resources, he's not necessarily going to connect you to.
Well, a lot of my...
people who are very self-contained and are very eternally happy. They don't actually give a damn about anybody else.
Yes. That would lead us on to another discussion of what exactly happiness is, various personality disorders. I have a discussion to answer that, but there isn't the time to do it here, I'm sorry. But do talk to me afterwards if you like.
You want something that leads distractions as well, don't you? That their mind is only on you.
They're only on their task. They can allow all their resources to come in to be inspired by what they do. There are loads of stories of, for instance, there's a book called Sources of Power. I forget who wrote it. He talks about the way experts make decisions. Nothing to do with happiness, by the way. But he has stories of how this nurse on a pediatric ward, specializing with very sick infants, was able to override 3 different doctors and 2 nurses because she had an intuition linking together various aspects of her experience over the past 20 years that led to her saving that baby's life. If she had been distracted by a marriage, her laundry list, some catty nurse comment or whatever, she wouldn't have been able to save that baby's life. But she was able to just stay focused and just let her thinking be focused on the task at hand and allow that inspiration to come through. When you really know yourself as whole and as goodness, you're aware inherently of the nature of thought and the role of thought. And that allows you to detach healthily so that you're allowed to feel whatever you feel, but you don't have to get lost in them. And when you do, you can forgive yourself and be nice to yourselves. Oops, did it again. It's okay. It is a great sound, isn't it? It's a massive paradigm change. At the same time, it isn't. Because in a way, this stuff is like thousands of years old, isn't it? Yeah? But it's also a paradigm change as well, to really live it. Used to be that we think everything circled the Earth. It was all about me. Me, the Earth. But no, the sun is the center of our solar system. The hint is in the name. Took over 2,000 years for that to come up. The first guy was Aristarchus of Samos to suggest that it was possible. Took a long time for that to come around. Used to be people would be laughed at to think the Earth was round. We have to put you away somewhere. Yeah? Won't go through disease theories. Notions about childhood. Seeing children as different in this country alone has changed dramatically over the past 150 years. The concept of a childhood is actually a very new concept. It's a massive paradigm change. Please don't take it for granted. It's still not around in some parts of the world. The psychology of the personal. That's like, tell me about your childhood kind of way of doing interventions. Looking under the street lamp for the keys. To the psychology of the inner wisdom. And again, this has been around for ages. even before Aristarchus of Samos. But to bring it in and live it, that's your paradigm challenge to do. The level of psychology, it's very surreal, the subconscious mind. A lot of it is very right brain, pictures, sounds, nonverbal stuff. Of our story, our history, who we think we are and who we're afraid we are. When actually, this is what's real. This is what we experience, this is what's true. You know, of course, like I said, you go to psychotherapy like I did for 20 years, and they say, oh, look at this interesting fossil here. Let's go take it out and look at it really carefully. Tell me again about your father. Tell me again what happened when you were 7. Tell me again what happened when you were 4. Doesn't this link up to what happened when you were 8 and what happened with your brother there? It's about drilling down, skipping all of that, drilling right down through it, getting right to your inner wisdom. Whilst again having the paradox of having all the compassion for how overwhelmingly heavy all of this can be. But knowing this is your truth. That was the pretty picture I was talking. Our senses lie to us, they lie. Doesn't it look like the sun crosses the sky? I mean, come on. You know it doesn't. You know it, but it looks like it. And every day of your life, if you can see it, it's going to look like it again. And every day of your parents' lives, and their parents, and their parents, and their parents, and that's what it looks like. What can feel, be perceived as the truth may not be. It could be untrue. Real, but not true. The input of our senses has nothing to do with explanatory causality. This is critical. Absolutely critical. We can feel extremes of emotions, boredom even. But it's a perceived reality, not about causal reality. Over and over and over again, just like in the first slide, I said we're going to talk about this one thing in depth. Feelings, however compelling and overwhelming or beautiful, are not caused by events or circumstances, but by the in-the-moment thinking about the events or circumstances. It's all it ever is. It's all it can be. It's the nature of it. Just like two physical bodies have attractions to each other, they are mathematics for reality. What does it mean? We are the creator of experience, which doesn't mean we have an easy choice. But the creator of our experience are not what's happening out there with other people, with our relationships, with our jobs, with the car accidents, and it's certainly not other people's needs, including our children's. We are therefore responsible for our experiences. Here's another critical one. In fact, we are 100% responsible for 100% of our experience, 100% of the time, no matter what. You know, if I jump off a high building and I don't believe in gravity, I'm still going to go splat. Because the law of gravity is in operation whether I want it to or not, or whether I like it or not. This is a big one. You can never say again, and mean it forever, that you make me angry. Ever. It's you making you angry. But you can have compassion for yourself for getting angry. It's different. You're not lost in the movie. You're having compassion when you get there. You may not for a few minutes. Philosophically, as opposed to legally speaking, therefore, there are no victims or perpetrators.
As opposed to legally, the more important caveat. come back to paradox, you see.
Absolutely. Being able to hold paradox is absolutely essential for this. There's a perspective comparison here. How am I doing for time, by the way? Oh, I didn't set the time. And that clock is wrong. How much time do we have? Pardon? 45 minutes?
Half an hour.
Half an hour, 50
Awesome.
minutes.
Awesome. Okay. The traps of outside-in living. I'll be happy when I get a new job, I lose weight, when my partner comes back from Afghanistan, when my kid ties her shoelaces. Actually, I'm open to the possibility of somehow, despite everything, being able to choose right now to be happy anyway. And this is really funky, you can feel dual stuff. You can, like when my son died, of course I was blown away by that. Of course it was devastating. Of course it was. But I also had a very deep sense of peace, and I was okay, and everything was okay. They sat alongside each other in paradox, and I didn't try to resolve it. I didn't try to choose one or the other. Just allowed it. It's possible. I can't be happy because my childhood, my marriage. Oh, I can be happy irrespective of what's happening in the past or now. The past intrudes into now versus the past is contained in the past. In fact, I recreate my past and my feelings about it with my thoughts. This is a big one for all of us, especially for our kids, because we want them to do well, we want them to be happy, we want them to succeed. My children are vulnerable to circumstance. Bad circumstance means pain and deprivation, suffering, versus I am deeply resilient. Circumstance does not impact my well-being or my wisdom, which is innate. This is so even when I am in pain. That paradox. And again, the psychology of the personal. I'm my story, my name is Shoshana, this is when I was born, this is what happened, this is my education, this is my work experience, this is the way I think about things, these are my beliefs. That's not who I am. I'm not my story. I'm in charge of my story, whether I choose to accept that responsibility or not. Even when I don't experience that at all. I am something besides my body plus my personality. My I, who I am, cannot be put into words, insufficiently summarized as inner wisdom. That love, that peace, unconditionally. And unconditionally means without condition. So even when I screw up, even when I set the clock an hour the wrong way, I'm still okay. And I know my kids are too. And I know everybody is, even when they're not feeling it. And when you know that, it makes it much easier to think about all that stuff going on. I told you I'd connect to that. When you really get this, it's much easier to remember and think about all the people that are having an experience of not being okay and are suffering, the cruelty and malice of others. But you've got to get it first before you can lead your kids there. In regards to feelings, it's like, ooh, I like nice feelings, don't like negative feelings. It doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. How many of you have ever been to a party and want to avoid that happy guy in the corner? What passes as happy may not be. Very, very briefly touching on an issue back there. Of course, happiness can be deeply congruent as well. Expansive. Being angry can also be expansive. When I called the cops on my then husband that day, I was on it. My anger was exactly where it needed to be. When a year later I was cursing him for abandoning our daughter, it wasn't so hot. It's nothing about the anger. It's about the expansiveness or the edginess, the closing inness of it. Taking a stand, no, versus ooh. Yeah, there's a big difference. A closing in for the anger versus an expansiveness. Feeling sad, same thing. I felt incredibly sad when my son died, of course, again, of course. But I didn't get lost in the dark room desolation despair of it. Being anxious, even being anxious, could be this little niggling reminder. I left the iron on and its automatic switch off is broken. Oh yeah. Versus, I'm feeling anxious because of this stuff and that if that doesn't get resolved, it's bad. Any questions? This is where most of us are most of the time, very innocently, very compassionately. Like my daughter thinking her playfulness was in her trousers because they were jeans. When we're really invested in goals and outcomes, I really need something to happen. I need this to happen, or I'm not going to be okay. Your quality of mind is like the surgeon who's worried about the death that happened yesterday and the marriage is falling apart. It generates feelings of worry, anxiety, anger, frustration, urgency. Worry that we don't have something or we're going to lose it. Stuff we think we need to do or have. There's a realness to this crap that's zooming around in our heads. What do we do with it? We cope. We manage stress. Your stress management, it drives me bananas. No, it doesn't. Stress management leads to false comfort. Addictions, sometimes very hidden addictions, like I must stay married. Gambling, drinking, spending, sex, self-harm, smoking, drugging, TV, shopping, just managing the stress, distracting, stay busy. We get to that too. Yeah? You had a question? No? Okay. Oh, you were just doing it. Were we most effective? When we're just present. We're aware of the nature of thought. We know that what happens is okay. When we detach from outcome, our clarity of thinking is high, our quality of mind is high. Leads to taking inspired action infused with common peace, even if you're really pissed off at the time. It's a paradox. Questions? Okay. The guy who wrote this, Dr. Branton, means this very compassionately, and I've toned down some of his language to make it more acceptable and a bit less confrontative. But he's a very loving person in his attentions. The secret of the good life is in not suffocating in the mind's crap. The mind's crap is like heroin, or a warm blanket, or a warm body next to you, or money in the bank, or life insurance. It feels so good and protected and safe and warm that even if you do choke on your own sick, you don't mind so much. The alternative freedom is often way too terrifying for a mind to tolerate, so the mind hides from freedom behind piles of shit, under blankets of evaluation, in a bed of memories. He's got it. He doesn't know he's got it, but he's got it. We live dual paradigms. We move in and out of it. Many times every day. Even the Dalai Lama writes an Art of Happiness about getting upset. He's like, well, it was good enough for him. You listen to your own talking. There have been times when I've stopped people here, a couple of times already, said, wait, listen to the construction of what you just said. You've just held external circumstance responsible for your feeling. Listen to others with curiosity, with an open mind, and just hear it. It's going to become so visible. I don't know what it was like, especially for guys, you may feel like this as well. When I was pregnant, I suddenly started noticing all the pregnant women around. Did you get that? And when I was pregnant, it was like really cool, and then right after my baby died, it wasn't so cool. But I still noticed a lot. And of course, both times it was my thinking. Unless you allow yourself to see your thinking, you're vulnerable to getting lost in it and flooded by it. The trick is keep that paradox of compassionate awareness going for yourself. Reminding ourselves of our inner wisdom, because we lead our children there. We have to get it first. We can't say to our kids, "Don't you know you're okay already?" That's not going to work very well.
Get on and be peaceful.
That's right. When you know that all is well, when you know that you and your children are already okay, you shine with it. And it warms those around you. We only ever make two mistakes. We told you this, get to the slide as well. Ever so innocently. I cannot overemphasize the innocence enough. We innocently explain our unpleasant or distressed feelings as caused by something or someone outside of ourselves or by our bodies. The other mistake. We think we're happy because we're hearing the laughter of children, or seeing kids having fun, or being with family, that really beautiful sense of belonging. Being in snow, especially those quiet moments. It's all fallen, it's blanketed everything, or maybe there's been some frost and it's just gorgeous. We feel connected, understood and understanding, really in deep connection. We're having a blissful moment of solitude. We're contributing. It's a very innocent mistake to think that our happiness and contentedness and peacefulness comes from these things. Very innocent. But that makes us really vulnerable. What if we have a job that we really love, that really challenges us, and we give of ourselves, and we're there, but then we get fired due to budget cuts? Or we get maneuvered out by a psychopath, which happens. And your happiness is gone. No, it just feels like it. When you live here, you are so vulnerable. It's like something happens to blow you in a nice direction, and you get blown that way, and then you get like this rag doll in a strong wind blown the other way when something else happens. You've abdicated all of your choice and power and control over your life. One of the things that made people upset before was being out of control. You're never out of control, but you can have the experience of it. It's also about your sphere. No one's feeling guilty about it not being a sunny, warm day. Being aware of what you can control and influence. And again, we could really go into another whole day discussion about control and influence, but we'll kind of leave it there. We only ever have one problem when we get lost in our thinking. That's it. It's the only problem we ever have. You may think your problems are real. You have compassion for that, and understanding and acceptance. Because what's real is what you're feeling. It's just what you're feeling. And the loss of breakage of a favorite toy can be just as catastrophic as a death. Because it's a loss. All kinds of reasons why. It is real. You are feeling those things. And there's no reason to pretend otherwise or think you should feel something else. But what's true is constant. Our well-being is constant, even when we have absolutely no access to it whatsoever. Even then. The sons, you know, we go through this developmental stage. We've all had kids, so we all know this developmental stage of people, right? They've gone through their 6-month Lacanian mirror stage where they begin to recognize themselves as separate, so that in the studies, if you put a smudge on a baby's head and then they look in the mirror, they're not going to go wipe the mirror. They're going to wipe here, yeah? That starts happening from about 6 months. And they start playing people when they get a little older. Things disappear and they come back again. They disappear and they come back again. They disappear completely from experience and they come back again. And you play people. Our well-being is the same. We play people with it. Does that make sense? Just because it completely disappears from our real experience doesn't mean it's not there. Just like when you do this, doesn't make your baby disappear and doesn't make you disappear for your baby. Questions, challenges?
Just, could you expand on that a bit more? Do you mean when you're feeling sad, it doesn't mean you're not okay?
Exactly. You're just having an experience of sadness right now. And that's okay for you to have that experience.
You might have other implications in the long term. I mean, you have to bring time into it. So it might be quite acceptable to be sad in a moment. But it might, I mean, all of these emotions serve some purpose. So the purpose is you don't have to imagine why you're feeling sad, and it might be a response to take some action.
Feelings can serve many, many, many different purposes, including replicating themselves. And you know, like a computer refreshes, you're raising another important point. So how long does it take to have a thought? Like, think of a pink elephant. There, then it's gone. Now think of a giraffe. The elephant's gone. Now it's back again, because I said the elephant's gone. It happens so fast. But things like depression can last for decades. So it seems like people are having one thought. But what's happening is like a computer refreshing. How many times does anyone know? Like something ridiculous, like 200 odd times a second? We're having the same thought over and 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 over again, and our cords get bigger, and our neurotransmitter capacity gets bigger to generate that. And with depression, that works against us. We're having repeated thoughts, not the same one thought like a tone.
I read a rather good book about depression that you probably have read, and it has this acronym ABCD: adversity, belief, consequence, and something else.
I don't remember either.
Well, and it is the idea behind these initials, these letters, is that it allows you to manage your way out of negative thoughts. So you experience some adversity, and then you have a belief about it. And the belief is what creates the consequence.
Yes.
And so you have to change the belief.
There are a series of consequences. So the consequence is, if you have one thought, the consequence is that you have this feeling. If you have this feeling, the next consequence is that you then decide what the next action is going to be. And it's coming through that filter that we were talking about. In this case, through a filter of depression, but it can come through other kinds of filters as well. It can only come through those filters because we only have our thinking. Does this mean I have to change my thinking? Your thinking does change. Again, being really attentive to language is the structure of the question. If I have to, it means there's a should here, which means there's an outcome in mind that's being aimed for, which means you're on the red crap thinking already. Would I like to change my thinking? Often, yes. Do I have to? Not at all. Is it okay to do stuff to change my thinking? Sure. Go ahead. I talked yesterday about tapping, for instance. Emotional freedom technique. Highly recommend. Do I have to stop thinking? Go ahead and try. Because even when you're having an experience of peace that's nonverbal, We're not just talking about verbal thoughts here, we're thinking as also constructed from non-verbal capacity, yeah? When you're meditating and feeling peaceful, you're having non-verbal thoughts of peacefulness. Ta-da! You can't stop thinking. You can't have experience and not think. It doesn't work that way. How is it possible to feel miserable and still be okay? Oh, that's psychobabble nonsense. It's holding that paradox. It's okay to be sad. There's feeling sad and knowing you're also okay, holding that together. Am I stupid or a failure or an idiot if I have a bad mood? Because the bad mood is just when I know it's my thinking and I could say, look, it's my thinking making me upset, and I'm still upset. Why am I still upset when I've already said it's my thinking? What's going on here? Of course you're not stupid or a failure. Of course not. You're just having an experience of your thinking. And then it can go back. Does this mean I have to change my thinking? No, but you can if you wish. But it may not happen just naturally. And here I really part company from many people in this field, where for me, understanding I have a bad mood and understanding it's that stacked up thinking, moods will come from stacked up thinking. Yeah, it's okay for me to work on deconstructing that tower that leads me to feel things that I would rather choose not to have. But again, it could take years to get through that. But it's okay to make that choice, but you don't have to. Because you're already okay. This was one for me. How is it possible to be safe or for my child to be safe if they're physically at risk? How is that possible? Remember talking about the Israeli soldier who woke up blissful after a double amputation? Our well-being doesn't come from our bodily experiences. It doesn't mean that therefore you advise your child, you know what, you're okay anyway, don't worry about it. There's systemic action that's making the bullying happen and systemic action required to shift the system that's generating the bullying. But you can still hold the okayness for your child whilst you take appropriate action. Very, very important, the system of it. Do nasty and cruel people have inner wisdom too? Sure. They just haven't got access to it. Like my mom. Absolutely no access to any inner wisdom whatsoever. Of course she had it underneath. It was just in practical terms. It was just inaccessible to her because she had stacked up choices. Bad choices. Or rather hurtful choices. You wouldn't expect a child to really get this as deeply as all of you are getting this right now today. So isn't it unfair to hold children accountable and responsible for their thinking? You hold your children responsible for all sorts of issues around physics and vector interventions. The vector of a moving car and your moving child. You hold them, literally. It's just another law. They get it more and more as they get older. And you keep on coming back to it from different angles. In education, there's this idea of spiraling. You come back to the same idea over and over again, but from a more profound perspective. It's the way it is with your kids. Yes?
I can get the theory of it being, I would find it reasonably, not easy, but I would find it advisable and good to be trying to teach my child to say, you know, well, there are reasons why you feel like that, and da-da-da-da-da, and try and get them to reframe that. But then I'm stuck on happiness side, because if she came to me and said, hey, I'm so happy because I've been chosen to do it, that isn't the moment that I want to say to
no,
them.
not at all.
But at some point she's going to come back to me with that, well, that's the other side of the coin. If you're saying my feeling sad is only a choice I make, then are you then saying I shouldn't feel it? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I can really see you wanting to be careful with your language as well. And yes, you're absolutely right. As the parenting, as with comedy, timing often means a heck of a lot. And so, yes, when a child comes in belting, yeah, I got a great grade on the test, I'm so happy. That's not the one saying, no, it's not. Obviously, you know, but later, when they've calmed down, because that also prepares you for when they get 1 or 2, or God forbid, even 3 wrong. Yeah? So that they know their happiness doesn't come from that. And it comes from that sense of self-worth, because what the child is saying, if they get something wrong on a test, if they feel devastated, they're saying that my well-being is invested in those little red numbers. It's very superstitious, really, because all those numbers are a little bit of maybe red ink on a bit of page, yeah? Like a bank statement, a bit of printed information. It's superstitious.
Yeah, a lot of society is built on superstition and the way
Yes. Which is, and one of my campaigns and passions in life is to bring the intellect back, which is why I'm doing these things and I have slides about it.
You've got a very good diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't got a cure.
Cure for what exactly?
For thought. You have.
Sure, there's a cure. It's death.
But it's not. You can't. You know, that's a flip answer.
We cannot stop thinking. It's our relationship with thinking. There is no cure for to say that we need a cure for thinking. It was flippant. I did it for the joke, and I apologize for that. That was kind of funny. And so we don't need a cure for our thinking because we're okay no matter what we're thinking. That's a lot of what I'm encouraging you to take on board. You don't need to cure yourself. You're already okay.
I think you're skirting around the solution. I mean, I think part of the solution is having the right values, and you're avoiding saying that. I mean, it's implicit in what you're saying that it's all right to accept mistakes, but that all rightness flows from a value judgment.
It's more like when you're talking about causality, when you know yourself to be deeply good, what action you're inspired to take out of that. And the values that come out of that will be ones that are congruent with an organized society and low crime and high achievement and all that sort of thing.
But you see, that knowledge is a very difficult thing.
Yes.
It is ultimately a choice. People choose to know that they're good or bad. And quite often, you know, unfortunately, mercifully, there's a minority who choose to think that they're bad.
It's not a minority at all. It's actually not a minority at all who choose to think they're bad. It's those but that most of us struggle to compensate for that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about seriously bad, you know, people who.
Yeah, and intellectually speaking, one of the things that I'm really mulling my intellect over is the issue of psychopaths, which have different brain functions as well in terms of emotional capacities. And again, it's a discussion to further have. There's a lot stacked in here. I could teach this for weeks on end about all the implications in here. We just haven't got the time to go into it in the depth that we'd like to.
I think your fundamental position, it seems to me, is to make that, because I was very confused at the beginning, because taking a Freudian view, you're kind of taking the whole psychodynamic processes and applying the intellect to them. It could be a description of what you were trying to do. And I was sort of struggling with that, because I was thinking, well, if it was easy to get the conscious mind to control the unconscious, which is what it sounded like at the beginning, then we would have done that.
Exactly.
That would happen.
Exactly.
But I think what you're saying is that what you're not looking for, I don't think so in terms of the solution, there is a paradox, there is a dilemma. What you're saying is there is a fundamental dilemma, and we'll recognise it. And that's what it seems to me is what you're saying. And then what it then comes out is there are all sorts of ways and techniques and thinking and all the rest of it.
Once you get the first essential paradox,
Yeah.
that's the critical bit.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's, I mean, it's interesting when we've had a number of conversations about our son, who is profoundly gifted with his godparents. One of the things his godparents his godfather will analyse that and say, where are you going with this? You know, where are you going with all this thought that you're putting into him and all this education of yourself and you know, steering him in the right direction? And you know, ultimately, want to be happy. But none of us can actually describe what that is. And it's a journey of keeping them constantly happy. But you know, engaging regularly with school is about positively managing that they are on an even keel, both for themselves and for those other people in their class that they're not disrupting. But it's keeping that constantly dynamic, changing sense of happiness, or on an even keel, or whatever you want to call it. We don't know what happiness will be. Happiness isn't they go to Oxford and do PP and become the Prime Minister. It may be for some people. But being happy is feeling the inner strength of knowing who they are, feeling understood, feeling connected with their emotions, and not feeling these swings or not understanding why they feel like that. Isn't that really what, you know, what we are doing and wanting to, when we say we want to see our children be happy, we want them to ultimately be happy in their lives, because we're partly assisting them before they are able to understand all their intense emotions or their sensitivity to things, is helping them navigate through that path. We just don't know where we're navigating them to, and everyone is different.
Sorry, we've got 1 minute left. And I know we're probably going to go over a little bit. Part of what, I can't unpick all of the rich stuff of what you've just offered us, but part of what you're also pointing to is again that paradox, because there are values in there that come from knowing that there's something internal where happiness is coming from. But it doesn't mean, just because we're okay all the time, doesn't mean we don't go to our school and champion for our kids. Of course not. Of course not. And I know it's a lot richer than that, and I'm so sorry we're running out of time. And I will email you these slides if you wish. Sasha, we didn't send them around. If you could please put down your name and email. As I go through the last minute, I'll go through. So put your name and your email down if you want the slides. And the handouts as well, I can email them to you. Not done yet, I'm going to race through the other slides so you do this. The major implication from your parenting is seeing the innocence in your children. Because at the moment of their tantrum and their selfishness, that person, big or little, has lost their connection to their inner wisdom. It's up to you to hold that. Holding that means compassion. Another slide about that next. When you're recognizing the innocence of the involved parties, you're in compassion. Compassion in part means acceptance. Anger means in part judgment. Acceptance leads to accountability, and anger leads to punishment. The judgment leads to punishment. Where do you think your kids want you to be? Your inner wisdom action guide. Talk about this stuff before you need it. We talked about timing earlier. And as much as possible, don't we all know life gives plenty of opportunity? Limit interaction when they're in their drama, when they're lost in their thinking. There's no reasoning in those moments. Leave it be. Come back later. Over time, you find yourself reacting to it less and less and less because you're unstacking your towers. We talked about this a lot during the course. Resources on inner wisdom. There are loads and loads and loads of stuff here. Again, I'll email these to you. Somebody Should Have Told Us by Jack Pransky. You Can Be Happy No Matter What by Richard Carlson. Specifically a parenting book with these principles, another one by Jack Pransky. Loads of videos and movies, some of which have children in them, so it's good to share with kids. Especially if you look up anxiety on there. There's a conference going on in November as well, and I've got a chapter on forgiveness, which talks about these things as well. Call us, call me, read, explore, think, enjoy.